Dr. Amanda Hayes hadn't expected anything unusual from the morning's signal analysis. CET's New Mexico array had picked up the same background noise it always did, until 9:47 a.m., when every pattern recognition algorithm she'd written over the last decade started screaming alerts. "That's not possible," she muttered, enlarging the waveform display. The signal was too clean, too precise. Radio waves didn't propagate through space this perfectly unless they're being actively maintained, she whispered, her coffee forgotten and growing cold beside her keyboard. Her fingers flew across the keys, running confirmation protocols she'd designed but never seriously expected to use. 3 hours later, her small office was crammed with senior researchers and military officials, all staring at the same impossible data. The signal wasn't just coherent, it was getting stronger, and it was approaching Earth at speeds that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. "Dr. Hayes," General Roberts's voice cut through the heated scientific debate. "In your professional opinion, what are we looking at?" She took a deep breath. "Sir, this is a controlled transmission, and it's attached to something big. Really big." As if on cue, every phone in the room began blaring emergency alerts. Outside her window, she could see people pointing at the sky, where massive shapes were appearing in broad daylight. Geometric forms that hurt her eyes to look at, as if her brain couldn't quite process their dimensions. The first transmission came exactly 6 minutes after the ships appeared. It was in perfect English, transmitted simultaneously on every frequency humans had ever used. "Greetings, planetary civilization designation. Earth. This is the Galactic Trade Federation's Department of Revenue Collection and Asset Protection. Our scans indicate your world has been using proprietary faster-than-light communication technologies, specifically radio wave manipulation as covered under Galactic Patent 2187X4A, without proper licensing or compensation for approximately 126 of your solar cycles. We are here to collect." Amanda watched in stunned silence as more ships materialized, their hulls gleaming with an iridescence that reminded her of soap bubbles. Beautiful, but with an underlying sense of fragility that her scientist's mind couldn't ignore. The next transmission included a bill. When the numbers were converted to Earth currencies, the total made global government debt look like pocket change. They wanted payment in rare Earth elements, enough to strip mine the planet several times over. "This has to be a joke," one of her colleagues said, but Amanda was already diving deeper into the signal analysis. Something about the transmission method wasn't adding up. The aliens were using compression algorithms that seemed needlessly complex, almost like they were compensating for a fundamental misunderstanding of how waves actually worked. As the world's governments scrambled to respond, Amanda isolated a curious pattern in the carrier wave. It reminded her of something she'd seen years ago in a theoretical physics paper, one that had been quietly classified and removed from publication. She'd only read it because her old professor had slipped her a copy, saying someday it might matter. That day had apparently arrived. "General," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I need to make a call to Dr. Whitman at Los Alamos, and then I think we should take a very close look at the aliens' patent claims, because either they're bluffing or they don't actually understand how their own technology works." The general raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" Amanda allowed herself a small smile. "Because according to these readings, they're using a brute force approach to something we figured out a cleaner solution for back in the 80s. We just never built it because we thought it was impossible." She paused, looking up at the ships that were now clearly visible through her office window. "Turns out we were wrong about the impossible part." As military jets screamed overhead and emergency sirens wailed across the city, Amanda Hayes began composing an email that would soon have her cleared for access to humanity's most classified physics research. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed humanity's relative youth meant technological inferiority. They were about to learn otherwise. The helicopter dropped below the cloud cover, revealing a sprawling array of solar panels that stretched across the Atacama Desert like a metallic ocean. Dr. Amanda Hayes pressed her face against the window, wondering why she'd been rushed from New Mexico to chill, with barely time to pack a toothbrush. Impressive, isn't it? Colonel James Morgan had to shout over the rotor noise. Best cover story we ever came up with. Everyone thinks it's just another solar farm. Even Greenpeace loves us. The helicopter descended toward what looked like a maintenance shed, but turned out to be an elevator entrance. As they dropped underground, Amanda's ears popped 3 times before they finally stopped. "How deep are we?" she asked. Morgan checked his watch. "About now. 2 kilometers and counting. Welcome to Project Helios, Doctor, where humanity's paranoia meets its potential." The elevator opened into a facility that made Norad look like a basement bunker. Massive screens covered the walls, displaying real-time data from the alien fleet above. Hundreds of scientists and military personnel moved with practiced efficiency, but Amanda could see the tension in their faces. "We've been preparing for first contact since 1947, Morgan explained as they walked. "Not because we saw any UFOs, but because a physicist named Katherine Johnson calculated that it was mathematically inevitable. She also theorized that any alien civilization advanced enough for interstellar travel would likely be advanced enough to be a threat." They stopped at a massive window overlooking a chamber large enough to house the Statue of Liberty. In the center, a device that looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a giant lens array hummed with barely contained power. "The Helios Array," Morgan said proudly. "Officially, it's a solar power collection and distribution system. Unofficially, it's the most powerful particle beam weapon ever conceived. The only problem is, we've never been able to get it to work properly." Amanda studied the readouts on a nearby screen. "These power requirements are impossible. You'd need every solar panel on Earth to..." She stopped, her eyes widening. "That's exactly what you've done, isn't it? Every major solar installation in the world is secretly connected to this." Morgan nodded. "Got it in one, Doctor. But power isn't our biggest problem. We understand the basic physics, but something's missing. The beam disperses before it can reach orbital distances. According to your work on wave propagation, you might be the key to solving that." Amanda's mind was already racing through calculations. Those compression algorithms the aliens are using, they're compensating for something they don't understand. If we cooled. An alarm blared, cutting her off. One of the techs called out, "Sir, the Federation ships are deploying something into the atmosphere. Some kind of survey devices, dropping into low orbit." Morgan cursed. "They're getting impatient. How long would you need to get this operational?" Amanda was already moving to the nearest terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "The aliens' transmission method is like someone using a sledgehammer to drive a nail. They're brute forcing their way through space-time instead of working with it. If we apply the quantum tunneling principles from my classified paper..." She trailed off, lost in calculations. Morgan watched as equations filled the screen, his expression growing increasingly concerned. "Dr. Hayes, how long?" She looked up, her eyes bright with revelation. "Get me access to the core programming and the main array, and find out if my daughter's okay. She has my old notes on quantum field propagation in her physics textbook, and I don't trust these aliens not to go looking for leverage." Morgan was already reaching for his phone. "You think they'd..." "I think..." Amanda cut him off. "That we're dealing with a civilization advanced enough to cross galaxies, but primitive enough to think they can bully an entire planet. That makes them dangerous and desperate." She turned back to the terminal, lines of code reflecting in her glasses. "And I think humanity's about to teach them a very expensive lesson about underestimating their debtors." Above them, the Helios array hummed louder, as if sensing its moment was finally approaching. Ambassador Sophia Torres had faced down dictators and diffused nuclear standoffs, but explaining Earth's patent law to an 8-foot-tall alien with crystalline skin was definitely a first. The Federation representative, who called itself Trade Adjudicator Vakril, sat across the UN Security Council chamber, its faceted head refracting light, in ways that gave half the diplomatic corps migraines. As per Galactic Trade Regulation 47 Beta, Vakril's translated voice chimed like breaking glass. We have provided adequate notification of intellectual property violation. Payment schedule flexibility can be discussed, but payment itself is non-negotiable. Torres kept her face carefully neutral, buying time while her tablet discreetly displayed updates from Project Helios. Perhaps, she suggested, we could review Earth's own extensive body of patent law. For instance, the principle of prior art. A sound like shattering windows interrupted her. It took a moment to realize Vakril was laughing. Ambassador, your species had barely mastered steam power when these patents were filed. There can be no prior art claim. Torres's tablet vibrated. A message from Dr. Hayes. He eat them, talking. Breakthrough Jui. With DAGGTER's homework. Physics noti what het we thought. In the Atacama facility, Amanda Hayes stared at the photo her daughter had sent. A half-finished physics worksheet with doodles in the margins. But those weren't just doodles. They were wave interference patterns, drawn with the intuitive brilliance of a teenager who hadn't yet learned what was impossible. She's right, Amanda whispered, comparing the drawings to the alien transmission patterns. They're not compensating for quantum displacement at all. They're just pushing through it. Colonel Morgan leaned over her shoulder. In English, Doctor. They're using a sledgehammer instead of a key. All that power, all that technology, and they never figured out the elegant solution. They don't understand why their technology works. They just brute forced it until it did. Back at the UN, Torres was deploying every diplomatic trick she knew. Perhaps we could discuss licensing terms for future use, while setting aside the question of past. The chamber's lights flickered. On every screen, warning symbols flashed. Vakril stood, its crystalline form catching the emergency lights. We grow weary of delays. As a demonstration of our authority, we have begun preliminary resource assessment. Your scientists in Africa will want to evacuate the sampling zone. Torres's tablet erupted with alerts. Federation ships had appeared over the Congo basin, their hulls opening to deploy mining equipment that looked disturbingly like weapons. At Project Helios, alarms screamed as the facility's sensors detected the alien deployment. Amanda's phone rang. Her daughter. Mom, I figured it out. The homework you left me, about wave patterns. It's like that game where you push a rope instead of pulling it. They're doing it the hard way because they never. Baby, I need you to get somewhere safe. Right now. Is your aunt there? Mom, what's happening? The lights keep. The call cut off as power fluctuations hit the cellular networks. Amanda turned to Morgan, her face pale but determined. We need to power up. Now. The system isn't ready, he protested. Neither is the world for what they're about to do in Africa. She pulled up her daughter's worksheet, pointing to the simple drawings that showed what billions in alien research had missed. We have the key. We just need to turn it. At the UN, Torres received one last message. Keep them in chamber. Planetary power EV&T imminent. She stood, straightening her jacket. Trade adjudicator Vakril. Humanity has a counter-proposal regarding your patent claims. But first, let me tell you about a fascinating Earth concept called convergent development. In the Congo, the first alien mining probe pierced the Earth's surface. The ground trembled, and then something unexpected happened. The probe's energy readings began to fluctuate wildly. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Amanda Hayes input the final calculations inspired by her daughter's homework. The Helios array hummed to life, drawing power from every solar panel on Earth, about to demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just its technology. It was its ability to see simple solutions to complex problems. And sometimes, those solutions came from the most unexpected places. The Federation mining probe in the Congo was causing earthquakes that could be felt in Rwanda. Dr. Amanda Hayes watched the seismic readings with growing horror, while trying to reach her daughter's phone for the 20th time. No signal. "Your daughter's safe," Colonel Morgan announced, striding into the control room. "Our team picked her up. She's being brought here." Amanda's relief was short-lived as another tremor shook the facility. "They're not just mining," she said, studying the data streams. "Those probes, they're doing something to the fundamental forces holding matter together. It's like they're trying to liquefy the Earth's crust. Can we stop them?" Amanda pulled up her daughter's homework on the main screen, alongside the alien transmission patterns. "Look at this." Emily drew these wave patterns while solving basic physics problems. She didn't know they were impossible, so she found a solution that shouldn't exist. Morgan squinted at the teenage doodles. "I don't follow." "The aliens are using enormous amounts of energy to punch through space-time, like using a battering ram on a door." She pointed to Emily's drawings. But Emily figured out you can just twist the handle. The door was never locked. A technician called out, "Dr. Hayes, we're detecting massive power fluctuations in the alien fleet. They're deploying more probes." Amanda's fingers flew across the keyboard, translating her daughter's intuitive sketches into mathematical formulas. Their whole technology is based on overwhelming problems with pure force. But humanity, we had to be clever. We had to find workarounds. We had to understand the underlying principles because we didn't have the power to brute force solutions. The facility rumbled again, but this time it wasn't from the alien mining. The Helios array was powering up, drawing energy from solar installations across the globe. "Sir," another technician shouted, "we're detecting alien signatures approaching the facility. They've tracked our power draw." Morgan reached for his phone, but Amanda grabbed his arm. "Wait, show me the scan." The tactical display showed 3 alien craft descending toward the Atacama Desert, but something about their flight pattern. "They're compensating," Amanda whispered. "Look at how they're adjusting their approach. All that technology, and they still don't understand basic wave dynamics. They have to actively fight against principles they should be working with." The doors burst open as Emily Hayes was escorted in by security personnel. The teenager's eyes went wide at the sight of the facility. "Mom, is this because of my homework?" Amanda hugged her daughter tight, then turned her toward the main screen. "Emily, I need you to explain exactly what you were thinking when you drew these patterns." "It was that problem about wave propagation through different mediums," Emily said, studying her drawings. "Everyone else was trying to calculate how to power through it, but I figured, well, if you matched the frequency just right, couldn't you kind of dance with it instead?" Amanda's eyes lit up. "Dance with it," she repeated. "Colonel, the aliens' patent claims are based on forcing waves to carry information through space. But Emily's solution, we're not violating their patents because we're doing something completely different, something they never even imagined was possible." The facility shook again as the alien craft drew closer. Emergency lights flashed as the Helios array reached critical power levels. "We need to make a decision," Morgan said. "If we power up the array, we'll be committing to a fight." Amanda looked at her daughter's homework one last time, then at the readings from the Congo where alien machines were tearing apart the Earth's crust. "No," she said, entering the final calculations. "We're not going to fight them. We're going to teach them to dance." She pressed the activation key. Throughout the facility, the hum of power changed pitch, becoming almost musical. On the screens, wave patterns began shifting, transforming from rigid, forced configurations into flowing, natural rhythms. Above the Atacama Desert, 3 alien ships suddenly found themselves trying to navigate space that had begun to move in ways their brute force technology couldn't comprehend. The dance was about to begin. Darkness swept across Earth city by city, a rolling blackout unprecedented in human history. In New York, the lights of Times Square flickered and died. Tokyo's Shibuya crossing fell dark. Even the eternal glow of Las Vegas dimmed to starlight as every solar-gathered watt of power was redirected to the Atacama Desert. In Project Helios's control room, Emily Hayes watched the global power grid statistics with a mixture of awe and horror. "Mom, are we really doing this? Taking power from the whole world?" Dr. Amanda Hayes nodded, her eyes fixed on the Helios Array's charging indicators. "We need every joule we can get. The alien ships are powered by stars. We're trying to match that with solar panels and clever physics." Colonel Morgan's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Hayes, the Federation ships over Africa are increasing their mining activity. They're interpreting the blackouts as submission. They think we're surrendering." "Let them think that," Amanda muttered, making another adjustment to the array's frequency modulators. "Emily, show me again how you solved that homework problem." The teenager pulled up her notebook, pointing to her drawings. "See, everyone tries to push waves through space like this." She drew a straight line. "But if you look at how waves actually work in nature, they're more like this." She added a sinuous curve that seemed to flow between the lines of the page. "It's like you're not fighting the universe, you're asking it to help." An alarm blared. One of the technicians called out, "Power surge in Sector 7. The containment fields are starting to buckle." Amanda's fingers flew across her keyboard, making microscopic adjustments to the power flow. "The problem isn't getting enough power," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "It's getting it to flow the right way. We've been thinking about this wrong for decades." On the main screen, a visualization showed the Helios Array's energy pattern, rigid, focused, trying to force its way through space. Besides it, Emily's homework drawings seemed to mock their efforts with their simple elegance. "Mom," Emily said suddenly, "what if we're still doing it their way? Trying to overpower everything?" Another alarm joined the first. The facility's lights dimmed as more power was diverted to stabilize the array. Outside, the alien ships were descending through the atmosphere, their hull configurations shifting in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. 2 minutes until they're in weapons range, Morgan reported. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Amanda looked at her daughter's drawings again, then at the power flow diagrams. "Emily, what if we took your wave pattern and applied it to the power distribution itself? Not just the beam weapon, but the way we're gathering energy." Emily's eyes lit up. "Like turning the whole Earth into one big waveguide." Amanda was already implementing the change, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. The planet's rotation, the magnetic field, the ionosphere. We're not just gathering power, we're conducting a planetary symphony. The alarm suddenly fell silent. On the main screen, power flow indicators that had been reading in the red began to shift, not dropping, but changing. The energy wasn't being forced through the grid anymore. It was flowing naturally, like water finding its own path to the sea. The Helios Array's hum transformed, becoming deeper, more harmonious. Throughout the facility, people stopped what they were doing, feeling the change in their bones. "Federation ships entering weapons range," a technician reported, but his voice was full of wonder rather than fear. Amanda looked at her daughter, then at Colonel Morgan. "Sir, requesting permission to power up the array." Morgan nodded, a slight smile on his face. "Show them what humanity can do, Doctor." Amanda took Emily's hand and placed it on the activation panel beside her own. Together, mother and daughter initiated humanity's response to the Federation's threats. The Helios Array came alive, not with the roar of defiance they'd expected, but with a song of pure physics, the mathematics of the universe made manifest through human understanding. Above them, the alien ships were about to learn that humanity hadn't just mastered power. We learned to dance with it. Ambassador Sophia Torres stood before the United Nations Security Council, facing the crystalline form of trade adjudicator Vakrill with newfound confidence. Behind her, screens showed the Federation's mining operations in Africa, their ships casting shadows over terrified populations. "Before you continue your resource extraction," Torres said, her voice steady, "I suggest you review these equations." She gestured, and holographic displays sprang to life throughout the chamber. Emily Hayes's homework drawings appeared alongside Dr. Hayes's advanced calculations, showing wave patterns that made the alien representative's crystalline form vibrate visibly. "This is impossible." Vakril's translated voice shattered the tension. "These are theoretical models beyond your species' capability to understand." Torres interrupted, allowing herself a small smile. "Or to implement." In the Atacama Desert facility, Dr. Hayes and Emily watched the diplomatic feed while monitoring the Helios array's power levels. The facility hummed with energy that flowed like water, following the natural pathways Emily had inadvertently discovered. "Federation ships are launching fighters," Colonel Morgan reported. "They're not buying it." Amanda squeezed her daughter's hand. "They don't need to buy it. They just need to witness it." At the UN, Vakril's form had shifted from translucent to opaque, a sign of agitation. Torres had learned. "Your attempts at deception are." The alien stopped mid-sentence as alerts blared throughout the chamber. Federation sensors were detecting something impossible. A power signature that didn't fight against space-time, but moved with it, through it, like a fish through water. "That's the thing about younger species," Torres said, reading from notes Dr. Hayes had prepared. "When we don't have the resources to brute force a problem, we have to understand it instead. Your patents, they're like claiming ownership of swimming by attaching motors to boats. We learn to sail." Vakril's crystalline surface fractured slightly, the equivalent of a scowl. "You dare to question algorithms refined over millions of years." "We dare to improve them," Torres replied. The screens behind her showed Federation ships deploying weapons, and we dare to suggest new terms. In the Atacama facility, Emily pointed to a power fluctuation in the array. "Mom, look, if we modify the wave pattern here, we cooled." "Create a resonance cascade," Amanda finished, already implementing her daughter's suggestion. "Colonel, please inform Ambassador Torres that we're ready." Vakril rose to its full height, towering over the human diplomats. "Ready for what?" Torres stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Ready to demonstrate humanity's counter-proposal. Either withdraw your mining operations and engage in fair technological exchange, or we'll show every species in the galaxy how to improve on your patents." "You would not dare." Vakril's translation device couldn't fully convey the mixture of rage and fear in its harmonic response. "Watch us," Torres said softly. At that moment, the Helios array activated, but instead of a weapons blast, it released a wave of energy that moved through space like ripples in a pond. Federation ships found their advanced drives suddenly out of sync with the very fabric of space-time. In the control room, Emily watched in amazement as the alien vessels struggled against principles her homework had helped unlock. "Mom, are we teaching them to dance?" Amanda smiled, adjusting the array's output. "More like showing them they never needed their heavy boots in the first place." On screens worldwide, people watched as Federation ships hung motionless in the sky, their brute force technology rendered useless by human finesse. In the UN chamber, Vakril's crystalline form had gone completely transparent, a sign of utter shock. Torres laid a tablet on the table between them. "Our terms are simple: real diplomatic relations, fair trade agreements, and mutual scientific exchange. Or we can continue this demonstration on a galactic scale." Vakril stared at the tablet, then at the screen showing its immobilized fleet. How did you?" "We did it," Torres said, thinking of a teenager's homework and a mother's brilliance, "by learning to work with the universe instead of against it. Now shall we discuss those terms?" Behind her, the screen showed the Helios array's energy patterns dancing through space, teaching the galaxy a lesson about underestimating humanity's capacity for elegant solutions. The Helios array sang. There was no other word for it. The energy patterns flowing through space created harmonics that human instruments could detect but barely measure. Federation ships hung in the sky like insects in amber, their powerful drives useless against the elegant mathematics of a teenager's homework. "Mom," Emily said, staring at the redouts, "I think we can do more than just stop them." Dr. Amanda Hayes looked up from her terminal, where she'd been monitoring the array's power consumption. "What do you mean?" Emily pulled up her original homework drawings alongside the current wave patterns. "See how their ships are trying to push through? They're still fighting it. But if we modify the resonance pattern like this," her fingers traced a new curve in the air. Amanda's eyes widened. "We could teach them how to move with it instead of against it." Colonel Morgan approached their terminal, his usual military stoicism cracking slightly. "You want to help them, after what they tried to do." "We want to show them a better way," Amanda replied, already implementing Emily's suggestion. "That's what humanity does at its best. We don't just solve problems, we share the solutions." In orbit, the Federation ship's energy signatures began to change. It started with their smallest vessels, their rigid power patterns gradually shifting to match the flowing rhythms of the Helios array. One by one, larger ships followed suit, their crews discovering that working with space-time required far less energy than fighting against it. At the UN, Ambassador Torres watched Vukril's crystalline form shift through colors they'd never seen before as the alien received reports from its fleet. "This is unprecedented," Vukril's translator struggled to convey the complex harmonics. "Our power consumption has decreased by 87%. Efficiency has increased by..." "The numbers cannot be correct." "They're correct," Torres said softly. "Humanity is offering you more than compliance with your patents. We're offering you advancement." In the Atacama facility, alerts began blaring again, but these were different. Federation ships were transmitting massive amounts of data, not as demands, but as requests for clarification. "They're asking questions," Emily said, scrolling through the incoming transmissions, "like students raising their hands in class." Amanda smiled, watching as her daughter's simple drawings became the foundation for a galactic physics lesson. Sometimes the best teachers are those who see things fresh, without preconceptions about what's impossible. The facility rumbled as the array's power requirements suddenly spiked. On the main screen, radiation warnings flashed red. "What's happening?" Morgan demanded. "Solar flare," a technician reported. "Massive one. It's going to disrupt our power collection network." Emily grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, the ships that learned the new pattern, they're changing position." On the tactical display, Federation vessels that had adapted to the new physics were moving to form a massive array of their own, their energy patterns synchronizing with Earth's solar collection grid. "They're helping us," Amanda whispered. "They're not just learning the dance, they're joining it." The combined power of Earth's solar network and the Federation ships easily absorbed the solar flare, transforming its disruptive energy into useful power. In orbit, more ships were altering their configurations, not to attack, but to learn. At the UN, Vukril had shifted to a new crystalline pattern never before seen in diplomatic contact. "Ambassador Torres, we withdraw our demands for patent compensation. Instead, we formally request establishment of," "What is your term?" "Cultural exchange." Torres smiled. "I believe we can arrange that." In the Atacama facility, Emily watched as her homework drawings were transmitted across the galaxy, teaching ancient spacefaring races a new way to move among the stars. "Did we just solve interstellar physics with a teenager's doodles?" Colonel Morgan asked, shaking his head in amazement. Amanda hugged her daughter close. "No," she said, "we solved it by being human, by looking at problems with fresh eyes, by working together, and by being willing to share what we learned." Above them, Federation ships danced through space in patterns that looked surprisingly like the waves a young girl had drawn while doing her physics homework, proving that sometimes the most profound solutions come from the simplest understanding. Humanity hadn't just defended itself, it had taught the galaxy how to dance. 1 month after the Federation's attempted resource extraction, Dr. Amanda Hayes stood in her new office aboard the Federation's flagship, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath her. The room's crystalline walls hummed with frequencies that would have seemed alien a few weeks ago, but now felt almost musical. "Dr. Hayes," a harmonic voice announced, The student delegation is ready. She turned to find Vakril, now Earth's primary liaison with the Federation, standing in the doorway. Its crystalline form had permanently adopted the more transparent configuration that humans had learned indicated openness and respect. "How many this time?" Amanda asked, gathering her materials. "Representatives from 47 spacefaring species," Vakril replied, "all eager to learn what your daughter calls the dance of physics." Amanda smiled, remembering how Emily's term had caught on across the galaxy. The Federation's official scientific journals now regularly published papers on haze pattern wave dynamics and terrestrial intuitive physics. The conference room was packed with beings of all descriptions, their translation devices creating the subtle background hum. At the front of the room, Emily Hayes stood confidently beside a holographic display of her original homework drawings. "The key," she was saying, "is to stop thinking about space as something to conquer and start thinking about it as something to work with. Here, let me show you." Amanda watched proudly as her daughter guided beings millions of years more advanced than humanity through principles that now seemed obvious in retrospect. On the screens behind Emily, real-time data showed thousands of ships across the galaxy adopting the new patterns, their power consumption dropping while their efficiency soared. Her tablet chimed with a message from Ambassador Torres. "Trade agreement finalized. Federation has officially recognized Earth as the galaxy's premier center for theoretical physics research. Also, your daughter's homework has been officially classified as a galactic heritage artifact." "Mom," Emily called out, "can you help explain the resonance principles? Some of the quantum engineers are struggling with letting go of their old methods." Amanda joined her daughter at the front of the room. Around them, beings who had once threatened Earth with destruction now took notes like eager students. "The trick," she began, "is to understand that the universe isn't your enemy. It's your dance partner." Later, in Earth orbit, mother and daughter stood on the observation deck of the newly established Galactic Science Academy, formerly Project Helios. The Atacama facility had been transformed from a weapon into humanity's gift to the galaxy, a place where species could learn to work with the universe instead of against it. "Did you ever imagine," Emily asked, "that my physics homework would change the galaxy?" Amanda watched Federation ships moving through space in graceful patterns that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. "I always knew you were brilliant," she said. "But you were also unafraid to question everything we thought we knew. That's humanity's real gift to the galaxy, not just the physics, but the willingness to see things differently." Below them, Earth glowed in the sunset, its cities lit not just by their own power, but by the efficient, flowing energy patterns that had replaced the Federation's brute force methods. Solar collection facilities that had once been part of a weapon system now powered a revolution in understanding that was spreading across the stars. Vakril approached, its crystalline form refracting the Earth's light. "The Federation Council has reviewed your latest proposals for educational exchange. They were particularly intrigued by your concept of homework." Amanda and Emily exchanged amused glances. The idea that assigned practice problems could lead to breakthrough discoveries had fascinated the galactic community. "Tell them we're happy to share our teaching methods," Amanda said. "After all, the universe has endless lessons to teach us all." As they watched, another Federation ship successfully executed the haze pattern for the first time, its energy signature transforming from rigid power to flowing grace. Somewhere in the galaxy, another civilization was learning to dance with the universe instead of fighting it. And it had all started with a teenager's homework, a mother's understanding, and humanity's unique gift for seeing the simple solutions that others had overlooked for millions of years. The galaxy would never be the same. Neither would humanity.